All right. Well, thank you all again for your interest in the Environmental Justice Fund during the 2024 application cycle. We are really excited that you're sharing your time with us and look forward to answering any questions that you may have about the application process or the application as a whole, or really any questions that you have. We likely will get through everything with less than an hour, so we'll definitely have plenty of time at the end for a Q&A. And before we dig in, I wanted to just introduce you all to the team. These are the folks that you will likely be interacting with if you do submit a proposal. My name is Jimena Fonseca-Morales. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the strategic advisor for the Environmental Justice Fund, which is housed at Seattle's Office of Sustainability and Environment. And I'd like to introduce you to my colleagues, Sujin and Jasmine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sujin. I use she, her pronouns. I've been supporting the Environmental Justice Fund for the past few years and happy to support it again, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. And Jasmine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine. My pronouns are she and her. I am an intern at the Office of Sustainability and Environment, supporting the Environmental Justice Fund. And I'm just here to help out, take some notes, and be an extra resource for you all. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you both. So just wanted you all to put a face to the team and to the name, so know that when you reach out to us, one of us, in addition to one of our incredible TA consultants, will likely be connecting with you, and we'll introduce you to them soon. Before we dive into the actual application process and details about how to apply, we wanted to just share some background about the Equity and Environment agenda, which is a really foundational piece to this grant program. The agenda is actually part of the Equity and Environment Initiative, and is closely tied to many of the programs that we manage at the Office of Sustainability and Environment. It serves as a foundational blueprint for how we approach our environmental work. And part of this context is that while Seattle has long been recognized as an environmental leader, we know that our BIPOC communities, including immigrants, refugees, individuals with low incomes, and individuals with different intersecting personality or identities, have not always benefited from the environmental progress that Seattle has made. And we know that one of the key principles of equity and environmental justice is to really ensure that those most impacted by environmental inequities have a seat at the table when it comes to decision making, to program design, to oversights of our environmental efforts. And so with that in mind, back in 2015, Mayor Murray at the time convened a group of community partners to form a steering committee who worked very closely with at the Equity and Environment Initiative at the time to actually develop the Equity and Environment Agenda, which is what you see on that left photo on your screen. And this was a group of 16 incredible community leaders who led the initial approach for what inclusive, culturally relevant community engagement could really look like. And that was done for the first time at that time. And it was how the Equity and Environment Agenda was actually born. It has 4 key goals that really reflect community priorities to advance environmental work in a way that centers equity and advances environmental justice for our communities. So just to give you a quick overview, starting with the top left corner, we have healthy environments for all, which is really about external conditions. So ensuring that our communities have access to clean air, to clean water, to green spaces, to culturally relevant and healthy foods, safety, and overall quality of life. And we ask questions about how do we improve the environment while we keep people rooted in place? How do we understand and address cumulative environmental impacts? How do we address the impacts of multiple environmental pollutants and hazards that are impacting people's health and their lives? So a lot of the projects that we fund often are happening at the intersection of this goal and different goals. So if we move on to the next goal at the top right corner, jobs, local economies, and youth pathways, it's really about growing the green economy. It's about ensuring that our BIPOC communities and our youth in particular have a pathway to green careers and to thrive in those spaces. So we do often fund programming or projects that allow us to do just that and are led by community. The third goal on the bottom left is equity in city environmental programs. This goal is really about how we work as a city to make sure that we understand how to build environmental programs that really connect with our communities in mind, particularly our communities that have been most impacted by environmental hazards and disproportionately impacted by climate change, really putting their priorities at the center of our work and making sure that our environmental programs are not only accessible to all, but really benefit all. And so it really has helped us to shift how we approach our work and how we support other entities that are also doing that work. And finally, we have environmental narrative and community leadership. This piece is really about acknowledging the fact that the environmental narrative has traditionally excluded the voices and experiences and solutions led by our BIPOC communities. And so this goal is really about infusing art and culture and creativity into all of our environmental approaches so that our community really sees themselves reflected in the environmental justice movement, because they have been leading in that space, and that they see how it connects to their lives, and their experiences are reflected in the work as well. So the strongest proposals that we have funded through the Environmental Justice Fund are those that connect to one or more of these goals and are really seeded by community, and the work is led by community as well. So that's just a little bit of background. So across the United States, we know that race is the most significant predictor of a person living near contaminated air, water, or soil. And it's why community members in 2018 really advocated for the creation of the Environmental Justice Fund. And actually, one of the key asks from the agenda was to develop a dedicated investment mechanism through which we could support community-led solutions that would advance environmental justice and climate justice. And so the Environmental Justice Fund launched in 2018 for the first time. And it's really a grant opportunity to support efforts that benefit and are led by or in partnership with those most affected by environmental and climate inequities, which for us are what we define our priority communities listed here on the screen. Those are Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants, refugees, people with low incomes, youth, and elders. The principles and values that really guide our work are the three that you see on your screen here, starting with being really community-centric. The Environmental Justice Fund benefits communities that are most impacted by climate change and environmental inequities. The program itself is really rooted in supporting efforts that are community-led, so funding efforts that are being seeded by our communities that are most impacted, and whose leadership is really instrumental to that work. And the third key value or principle is that we are really community determined, meaning that for the Environmental Justice Fund, we partner closely with community leaders who are actually providing funding recommendations. And those community members have the lived experience and professional experience within the environmental justice and climate justice movements within Seattle. So they are the ones who have the opportunity to review all proposals and advice on funding recommendations. And we'll share more about what that process looks like soon. So this year, getting into the actual nuts and bolts of the 2024 application cycle, this year we have $250,000 available to fund projects or programming. Applicants are able to submit a proposal for a request of either $10,000 or $25,000. And this opportunity is really designed to focus on smaller organizations or community groups. And we'll get into the details of what that means later. This year, we have a rolling application deadline, meaning that we are welcoming applications from now until the funding runs out or until October 20th at 5 p.m., whichever one comes first. And organizations or groups are welcome to submit one proposal. In terms of eligibility, eligible applicants must meet these requirements here on the screen. So proposals must be led by or be in partnership with our priority communities. Applicants must be a tribe or a tribal organization of any size, or they must be a non-tribal group or organization with an operating budget of $500,000 or less. And that should be averaged over the current fiscal year and the most recent fiscal year. However, the applicant defines their fiscal years. Applicants must also have a 501c3 status, or they must have a nonprofit serving as a fiscal sponsor, or they must be willing to obtain fiscal sponsorship if they are awarded, and we can support with that when we get to that point in the application process. In terms of what we fund, eligible projects and programs that are submitted for funding must occur within Seattle city limits. The work must benefit individuals who live, learn, work, or worship, play in Seattle, and again, be led by or in partnership with those most affected by environmental and climate inequities. And the work has to really advance climate or environmental justice. And I just wanted to note that if a group's office is located outside of Seattle city limits, that is okay. They are still eligible to apply if their work is happening within Seattle city limits and it primarily benefits people who live, learn, work, worship, and play in Seattle. We have here an overview of types of eligible projects. So if you are doing work on arts and storytelling, that is eligible. If you want to focus on capacity building for your organization or your group or maybe your community, that's eligible. If you're doing work around climate change adaptation or resilience, also eligible. As well as education or outreach on climate or environmental justice, coalition building to advance climate or environmental justice, community organizing is also an eligible type of project, as well as cultural knowledge preservation and or education. And neighborhood or community planning or visioning, including the design phase of those, is an eligible type of project, as well as skills building and development for green jobs pathways. And we do have some funding restrictions or ineligible activities. So we are not able to accept proposals from individuals. Funding cannot be used for scholarships or to purchase land for buildings. It can't fund capital projects, including the construction or renovation of facilities or site improvements. Funds can also not be used to maintain existing facilities or to make physical improvements to non-natural areas that do not have clear environmental justice purposes. Projects that are not accessible to the public are also not eligible for funding. And we do have also limitations around funding purchase of equipment like cameras, video recording equipment, laptops, tablets, phones, cell phones. But you can use your grant to cover the cost of rental for those types of equipment should you need it. And we are also not able to support the organizations or groups' overhead costs if they are not related to the proposed environmental justice project or program. And lastly, I wanted to just share a little bit about the free technical assistance that we have available for us this application process. So we do have two wonderful technical assistance consultants. You'll meet them soon. But they are eligible, or excuse me, able to provide support to all interested applicants. They can discuss your project idea for alignment with the Environmental Justice Fund. They are able to review your draft proposals and provide high-level feedback, as well as high-level edits on your draft. What they're not able to do is help you design your project idea in details, and they are not able to actually help draft responses to the application. And we encourage all interested applicants to reach out to us to request this technical assistance. Again, it's at no cost to you. You can request this technical assistance by emailing us at equityenviro@seattle.gov. And we do want to share just some tips to help save you time and strengthen your proposal. It's number one, encouraging you all to talk with one of our TA consultants before you start working on your project idea and application. They can also answer questions about your eligibility if you have any about those. And just giving yourselves ample time for the consultant to really work with you and help you refine your proposal. So 2 weeks is generally a good guide for that process. And here they are. I can let Nanette introduce herself, but we also have the wonderful Nancy Huizar, who is not with us today, but they are one of our fantastic TA consultants this year.
Thanks, Jimena. Hi, everybody. I'm Nanette, and hope to have an opportunity to connect with you. Hi, Sean. I haven't seen Sean in years. If you are interested, both Nancy and I have had connections to the EJ Fund in different ways since the beginning. So we're really excited. Huge, spots in my heart. Huge spot in my heart for the EJ Fund. So really excited to see you here today.
Thank you, Nanette.
Thanks, Nanette. So let's talk a little bit about the application components itself. When you first go to SurveyMonkey, there will be an eligibility quiz. It just covers a lot of what Jimena already shared, and we'll talk about the eligibility quiz in just a second. Also, when you go to SurveyMonkey, it will ask for your organization and project information. And then we ask you to fill out an application form that's available in a Word doc and just upload it to SurveyMonkey. You can upload it as a Word doc or as a PDF. And that application form basically covers 4 different things: a cover sheet, narrative, questions, project timeline, project budget. And then also in SurveyMonkey, there will be an opportunity to upload landowner authorization if your project changes or takes place on property that's not owned by you. And we just definitely encourage you to take a look at that application form and do all your work there, and then just come to SurveyMonkey when you're ready to upload everything. So what is that eligibility quiz? It's pretty simple. It's going to ask all those same questions that Jimena already shared with you. Yes or no, does your project address environmental and climate inequities in the city of Seattle? Do you have an operating budget of $500,000 or less for the current and previous fiscal year? If you are a tribe or tribal organization, you can respond yes, no matter what your budget size is. Does your project primarily benefit those who live, work, worship, and play in the city of Seattle? Is it led by those most affected by environmental and climate inequities? And if you are not a 501c3, are you willing to get one or get a fiscal sponsor that is one? And then finally, this is important. If you are a current grantee, we ask that you please contact Jimena first so that she can work with you on your project idea. So what are those narrative questions? There's 5 of them. If you've applied in the past, they will seem fairly familiar. And they cover basically 5 different categories. Community need, who's your community? Who are you serving, and how are they being impacted by climate change and environmental hazards? What will you do and how will you do it? How many people will you serve? People, who is involved in the design and implementation of the project? And what are those lived experiences and skills that they bring? Impact, What are your project outcomes and how do these address the community impacts that you named in question number 1? And finally, racial justice. What practices and approaches does your organization or group use to advance racial justice? When you go to the application form, you'll see that we don't have word limits or character limits for each question. What we're asking is you to use a guideline of 4 pages or less for any combination of that, those 5 responses. So if you want to spend a lot of time really talking about community need, and really want to talk a lot about your community, you know, there's not going to be a word limit to that. We're just asking for 4 pages or less in total. So tips for those narrative questions: be complete but brief. If you go to the application form, you will see a link to a sample application that will have basically like, this is what we think is a complete but brief response to your application. And again, the guideline is up to 4 pages. If you submit an application that has 5 pages, we will not reject it. It's just a guideline, but that's what we're asking for. And this is to really keep in mind the time and effort for the community reviewers who are community members who are reviewing, to be able to dive into your project in a thoughtful way. And then finally, again, those sample application responses are available to be reviewed. So after those narrative questions, there's a simple timeline template. And basically, please provide your major milestone activities and when you think they'll happen. Like planning meetings, March 2025, secure venue, April 2025, etc. And then the last thing in the application form is the project budget template. And there's 2 sections. There's a top section that focuses on income. That very first line is, how much are you requesting from EJ Fund, 10,000 or 25,000? If your project is bigger than just this request, please, you know, add any other funding sources that you may be including into your project. If you have a foundation or if you have private foundations, and then the status of whether or not that's committed or pending or something that you're planning for. And then the second side, the bottom side of that template is your expenses. So we provided some pre-loaded categories for you. You don't have to have an expense for all of these categories. Some of them can be 0 if you're not planning on, you know, let's say using consultants, etc. But that amount in the project expenses should match to what you're requesting. So if you're asking for 25,000, then the expenses should be 25,000, etc. And then please also complete that last column line item details. So if you're asking for $20,000 for salaries, you might say, you know, $50 an hour, 400 hours for project coordinator, something like that.
All right, so we wanted to just briefly do a bit of a demo, if you will. So I will share my screen. One second. Okay, not that option. Sorry. Okay, so we will share this slide deck with you all after today, and you will have access to all these links. And what we wanted to do now is just take you to the landing page of the Environmental Justice Fund. So I'll make this bigger here. You will see on the right-hand side, there is a how to apply box. This is where you will find the application form, which has the timeline template, the budget template, and the narrative questions that Sujan just went through. You will find the application guidelines, which has a lot of really great information including pretty much everything we've covered in this meeting, as well as a list of frequently asked questions. So definitely encourage you to peruse through this when you have a moment, if you have not done so yet. The next thing you'll see is the complete application sample that Sujan just mentioned. So, and this is where you will find these complete but brief responses to the narrative questions. You'll see a sample timeline and budget for this example project. And I apologize. I hope the scrolling isn't too overwhelming, but you'll see that. And if we go back here, you will also find the scoring rubric, which is what our community review team members will be referencing as they review your proposals and arrive at funding recommendations. So definitely encourage you to take a look at this, and Sujan will also go through these details shortly. And finally, and maybe most importantly, you will see this apply here button. So if you click there, it will take you to the actual SurveyMonkey page, which is where you will need to submit your proposal. So even though you will need to complete the Word document with your narrative responses and your timeline and budget, you will need to update that or upload that, excuse me, through the SurveyMonkey portal. So if you hit next, you will encounter the eligibility quiz, and you'll just move through that, and then you'll have the option to provide all of your organization's information and ultimately submit your responses to the narrative questions. With that, I will pass it back to Sujan.
Great. So speaking of that application scoring rubric, there's basically two main areas that we're asking the community review team members to review in your application. The first one is it aligned with the EJ Fund purpose and priorities? And all 5 of the narrative questions will lead to that the alignment question. So are you understanding your community's needs? Are you able to clearly address them in your project outcomes? Are the priority communities the key decision makers or deeply involved with all project phases? Do you have the lived experience and skills to carry out the project? And does the organization have a specific and meaningful commitment to racial justice? The second category that they'll be reviewing is the project feasibility. And basically, there's going to be 3 areas that they'll look at. They'll look at your project description, as well as the project timeline and the budget. Are the activities feasible? Does the timing make sense? And is the budget appropriate for the proposed project? So we're asking for the applications to be submitted at least 60 days before a project is due to start. And this is basically the reason why. There will be a process that takes place to get to a decision in contracting. Once the application is received, the staff will verify for eligibility. There might be some back and forth to verify that. And then it goes to review team members to read, score, and meet to make funding recommendations. They are meeting regularly, so hopefully that'll happen faster than in a larger process. And then those award recommendations get approved through an internal city process. And then finally, after the award notifications are sent, there is a contracting process that begins, and that includes, making sure that, all the requirements for contracting are in place before the contract can be signed and the funding can be awarded. So it is important to note that depending on the available funding left over, an award amount may differ from the request. If we have $35,000, if we have like $15,000 left in the total pot and you ask for 25, we'll only be able to award that last remaining amount. And then also application that is approved is not necessarily guaranteed funding. As we talked about in that contracting phase, to receive funding, the grantee still needs to complete and sign a grant agreement that meets the program and the city requirements. That includes things like insurance and et cetera. And then with that, I think we will open it up for questions.